You're listening to Stories to Create with your host, Cornell Bunting. Author, motivational speaker, and founder of EHAS Each Episode. Cornell sits down with inspiring voices to uncover the stories that shape who we are and who we're becoming. Get ready to listen, learn, and be inspired. The show starts now.
For the engineer. Yes. Welcome to another episode of Stories to Create podcast right here at EHAS CLUB. I'm your host, Cornell Bunting, and I'm hanging out with my beautiful co-host today, Miss Sydney Banyai. Did I say it right?
Dr. Cindy Banyai. Thank you.
Dr. Sydney Banyai. So on today's show, we will be going back with ex-Broward County Sheriff and author of the book, I'm Still Standing. My wonderful listeners, please help me welcome Mr. Raymond Hicks.
Good morning. How you brothers and sisters doing, man? It's a tremendous blessing speaking with you this morning. You know what? I tell you, it's amazing how God works, so
Hey, man.
Thank you so much for affording me an opportunity to speak to you all this morning.
Yes, sir. This is beautiful. I'm excited to have you on the show today, man. And when we talk with guests, because you have a really interesting story. And before we dive into that world, we want to dive into the younger world of Mr. Raymond. We want to go back. We want to know about a little bit of that upbringing,
Okay. You there, Brother Cornell?
Mr. Raymond looked like he's...
I think I was frozen for a moment there.
Yeah, it froze for a moment there.
Okay. So just to let our listeners know, we do have somewhat of an unstable connection right now, but we're making it work. So you guys gonna get this juice. We got some juice.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I heard what you said. Going back to my younger days, my name is Raymond Hicks. Of course, I grew up in poverty. I was raised by my mother. There was always chaos in my home, and when there was stabbing, cutting, my mother was shot. My dad went to prison. And of course, I was always fascinated with law enforcement, because after my mom and dad done plunged knives into each other's body, the cops used to pull me aside and say, "Come here, little man, let me talk to you," just to console me and calm me down. And I'll never forget it. They talked to me about the importance of, the handcuff, the gun, also the blackjack back in the days. They had the two leather straps with the steel at the end. So they talked about me about law enforcement. And I said if I didn't play professional football, then I would go into law enforcement. I was a standout athlete. I ran track. I shattered records in track, football, basketball. I was a great athlete, man, and it was really, really difficult for me, but my aspiration was to actually go on to become a professional football player. And I always promised my mother that if I made it, she would never have to work so hard. She worked 2 jobs, man. She was a migrant worker.
So, before we go into all of that, so where was this? Where was your upbringing?
I was born in Vero Beach, Florida, and I was raised in a little place called Guilford, but I was also raised here in Fort Lauderdale. Actually in the hood, the Green Apartments, which was referred to as Lennox Apartment. And it's in the deep side of like 6th Strong, really the bad area of Fort Lauderdale.
Okay. So you went through the gutter a little bit there in the younger years.
Yeah, man. I was brought up in the gutter. It was really difficult, man. I was always fighting. I've been fighting ever since I was about 6 years of age. It's something my dad always taught me, how to fight, and I've learned through it all. It's not about fighting, but it's about motivation. I didn't want to become a product of my environment, but I wanted my environment to become a product of who I am.
Yeah. So
of course, I thank God for this gentleman named Mr. Bob. He was an older white guy from New York. He took an interest in, in me and 4 of the guys. And he says, "Man, I know you young kids can make something out of your life. So you know, he was one of the ones that really inspired me as a young kid, man, you know, to go on and pursue football.
Well, so was that in middle school or in high school?
It was actually middle school, going back, because I played in the optimist level. You know, Mr. Bob would always pay like the YMCA, you know, the $15 or whatever it cost back then in order for us to play football. You know, of course, he stayed with me until my senior year in high school.
Okay.
Hey, I have a question. I'm very interested in knowing a little bit more about how you were able to avoid that lifestyle that you saw growing up. So are you saying that mentoring was one of the key factors of that?
Yes, ma'am. Mentoring is absolutely one of the factors that actually, you know, just the inspiration that Mr. Bob used to give us. You know, hey, I know you guys can make it, man. You know what I mean? There was like 5 of us. And all 5 of us have went on and did some, you know, great things, man, in spite of, you know, what you all going to learn from me today, this morning. And as I told this brother here, it's a tremendous blessing just to even conversate with you all, you know, because most people can't go through a fraction of what I've gone through. But I've learned, you know, going back to what you said, there was also a teacher named Miss Kirby, because I couldn't read or write when I was a young kid. And I always came home with D's and F's. And, you know, every time she asked me to read a sentence, you know, I couldn't read. So Miss Kirby, you know, she said, I need for you to get up and read this sentence. And when I got up to attempt to read the sentence, the other kids would laugh at me. They ridiculed me. So
that seems like it was a tough situation for you, even to recall, huh?
Yes. And, you know, she, you know, I always told the kids, I said, okay, you want to laugh? Wait after class. And after class, I went upside the head, you know? And she said, every time I turn around, Raymond, you always get into a fight. You know, when I asked you to read a sentence, and when I began to tell her what was going on in my home, and she said, oh my God, and then she began to tutor me. So I went from D's and F's, you know, to B's and C's to A, B's and C's, till I earned myself a scholarship to go to college. But I truly thank God for Miss Kirby, the teacher, you know, because had it not been for her, it was really rough for me, man. You know what I mean? My dad dropped out in 3rd grade. He couldn't read or write, couldn't spell his own name. My mother dropped out in the 7th grade. You know, eventually she got a high school diploma with the help of me and my daughters and my wife. And my brother got his GED with our help. So through it all, you know, I've learned that in life, you know, God positions certain people in your life for a reason. And I truly thank God for her, because had it not been for her and Mr. Bob and some other people, I don't know if I could, you know, be here talking about it to this day, you know, because my dad was he was a good man, but he had a temper out of this world. And so
where was your dad from?
My dad actually from Wellborn, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah, he was from Wellborn, Florida. My mother was from Moultrie, Georgia.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're just trying to understand the upbringing of them and the reason why they didn't really have a proper education that could have helped you as well and motivate you. So you didn't really get much from your parents as far as advice and stuff like that.
You know, my mama always gave us advice. My dad, you know, he taught me some things. Really, he taught me how to stand up for myself, you know, and I thank God for what he did teach me, you know, because at some point I needed that. And you'll learn this morning the reason why I thank God for teaching me, you know, how to fight and not to start fights, you know, but to finish it. And my mom always was the God-fearing woman. You know, she always cried out to the Lord, you know, and she had to harvest in the fields of Georgia when she was a young kid at 7 years of age. So, you know, it was really a difficult upbringing, man. You know, I used to go to the corner store and she would tell me to tell Mr. Friendly, give her $1 worth of bologna and a loaf of bread. She'll pay him on Friday. You know, there was some time I went to bed with a ketchup sandwich.
Man.
That sounds so tough.
You know, sometimes a ketchup sandwich, a mayonnaise sandwich.
Yeah.
You know, but one thing is for sure, I look up and I truly thank God today. You know, it's only by God's grace, man.
Yeah, man. Now, you done with high school. What was that first What was that first job?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Every young person carries a story of hope, of struggle, of dreams waiting to rise. But in too many underserved communities, those stories go unheard.
At ease, Inc. Everyone has a story. We believe every voice deserves a chance through mentorship, empowering programs, and storytelling workshops. We help youth discover their purpose, strengthen their mindset, and build a future they can be proud of.
From classrooms in Jamaica to communities across Southwest Florida,
EHAS is changing lives,
one story at a time.
but we can't do it alone. Join us, become a mentor, volunteer, donate, help us fuel the next generation of leaders, creators, and change makers.
Visit EHAS.org today, because when you help a young person share their story, you help them change their world.
I actually, after leaving high school, I went on to college. You know, I played for University of Southern Missouri. That's where I met my wife at. And I was a standout athlete there. And I left there and I came back here in 1986. But I shattered records in football. Had I stayed in college, you know, I would have went on and I would have gone pro. And
So you didn't finish
I
college?
came back here in 1986.
Did you finish college?
And yes, I was determined to go back and finish college. In 2012, I obtained my bachelor's degree in criminal justice and forensic science. I graduated with a 3.97 GPA. I went back and got my doctorate degree in theology. And, you know, I've done a lot of great things after everything that I've experienced and what I've gone through. So this whole thing that I'm explaining to you all this morning, it motivated me and inspired me to be even more of a better person than I've ever been in my entire life. You know, I've actually helped a lot of people, man, you know, just as Mr. Bob and Miss Kirby helped me. You know, I'm that Mr. Bob and I'm definitely, you know, that Miss Kirby now.
Wow. Shout out to Bob and Mr. Kirby. So
Shout out to all the mentors and people
I
who
know.
make a difference in young people's lives. Right?
Yeah. So, you know, becoming a sheriff in Broward County, what was that journey getting there?
Well, you know, as I mentioned to you all before, you know, I was really intrigued by the cops who came to my home, you know, when there was chaos. And I always said if I didn't play football, I would go into law enforcement. So 11/17/1986, I started working as a detention officer for the Broward Sheriff Office and working in the jails, you know, and of course, I was a highly decorated officer. I was a Gold Cross recipient, a Silver Cross recipient, 2-time Deputy of the Month. And back in 1990, they used to pull us out and, you know, had us working in sting operations, you know, where we would go out and do buy buses and whatnot. We had informants. And of course, you know, they gave us drugs to sell. You know, we used to arrest the assailants and we'll put them in a paddy wagon and then we posed as undercover sellers. So I started doing that back in 1990.
Okay, man. So you guys was doing it just like the drug dealers.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, back in 1990, the Broward Sheriff Office was manufacturing their own drugs, and it was given to us to be sold in the street, which is entrapment that I've learned here lately. And yeah, it was really crazy, man. You know, and of course, we arrested a lot of people back then.
What was the reasoning? What was the reasoning to do that? Let me understand that.
Well, they had a sting operation, you know, and the only way that they can actually get drug dealers was actually they manufactured the drugs themselves and they gave it to us to be sold. in the street. So if you had any type of street lingo, or if you came from the street, they used you to get out and pose as an undercover seller. And you don't have to take my word. I have documents that will prove everything that I'm saying to you, you know? And of course, that's when I started back in 1990.
Wow. So you guys, you feed them the drugs, but then go back and bust them with the drugs that you give them.
Well, the sheriff office was manufacturing their own drugs. And was given to us to be sold in the street, which is really entrapment, you know?
Right.
Yeah, can you tell us more about that? So how did you learn that? And then what did you do with that information?
Well, basically, the information was disseminated, you know, throughout the entire sheriff office. You know, the sheriff back then was actually Nick Navarro. And of course, you know, they were trying to take a lot of these guys off the streets. And the only way they can actually take these guys off the street was actually create their own drugs. You know, they had a deputy who was cooking the drugs over at the courthouse. And of course, they came to us and they gave it to us. And we got out there and we posed as undercover sellers. So if you come from the street, like I come from the street, you know, we use the street lingo. Yo, my nigga, I got them parlays. What's happening? You know what I mean? And, you know, it's that type of dialogue that you have with individuals, you know, to lure them into purchasing the drugs.
Wow. From your recollect, can you remember any individual that got lowered into that you would consider someone that was just in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Well, to be honest with you, you know, we never really arrested anybody, you know, just to arrest them. You know, we had informants, we had paid informants who would go into certain areas, and the drug that we gave them on the Ziploc package, it had a serial number. And there was also, the money was marked. So we would give it to an informant, a person who we had arrested, and that person would tell on other individuals that he or she may know about. And of course, you know, let me just turn this phone off.
That sounded like an eagle or a hawk or something.
Yes, it's an eagle. I love eagles.
That is crazy.
Yeah, so they will actually send, you know, he or she into the area. They will make the transaction with the selling. They will come back and give us the intel. And of course, you know, we'll swoop in and take them into custody.
Wow, man. Now, with what you guys are doing, like, was you assigned just in the specific area or you were all over Broward?
We was all over Broward. It was a multi-drug task force. You had Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale, Oakland Park, a lot of other departments, man. You know, it was a joint task force. I was working with OCD, which is organized crime, the cradle within 1,000 feet of the school, 3 years in the state penitentiary, and also the cradle.
Okay, so you just mentioned OC, is it ODC or OCD?
No, OCD, which is organized crime.
So how much involvement of a lot of the crimes that happened back then had to do with the organized crime unit? Like them involving it that really helped created the chaos?
Well, you know, back in the days, you know, that's the only way you can actually, take individuals off the street was we posed as undercover sellers, you know. You can't take a deputy, you know, and put him in a certain area and expect for that person, he or she, to be able to sell drugs, and they don't have the street lingo. So that's the reason why they use people like myself and others, you know, who went out there and we posed as undercover sellers. So there were certain people that they chose for this particular role.
Man, because I know back then there was a lot of killing and stuff like that. Have you guys was ever put in any position where you had to kill someone?
No, sir. As a matter of fact, I never even drew my gun on anybody back then. And, you know, of course, backup unit, they did. You know, when I was actually selling drugs, once we make the transaction, you know, with the subject, we will actually take off our hat or we'll take off a towel, and that would indicate to the backup unit to move in. So once they move in, their guns are drawn, and that person is actually forced to, you know, to the ground. They handcuff them, they retrieve the drugs and the money, and of course they take the person into custody.
What happened with those drugs? Like so those drugs that you guys seize, what do you guys do with those?
Well, a lot of time once they confiscated the drugs, they reused that drug again. But there came a time where I spoke out against it, because I saw a lot of these guys taking money. They was planting drugs on Black offenders and beating them to the ground and taking money. So I told them, I said, listen, man, this is morally wrong and totally unethical what you guys doing. I said, you know better than the ones we just put in the paddy wagon. What give you guys the right to do this? You know what I mean? And different than the one we just arrested. And they told me to mind my business. I said, what you mean mind my business?
Wow.
Yeah, so we always, because I'm not about planting drugs on nobody. I don't care who you are, where you come from. I'm not gonna plant drugs on you. I'm not gonna take money from you, and I'm not gonna beat you to the ground just because I feel like I'm wearing a uniform and a gun and I have the authority to do that. That says nothing about me as a deputy, man. I took on that job with the expectation that I want to make a difference in the community, and I've done that.
Wow. So with a lot of that foul play, how much percentage of the guys that got planted drugs on, how much percentage of that would you say you guys put in there that were guys that didn't really have anything?
Probably about 70%, 75%, some of these guys, man.
That's a lot. So you said that when you spoke out about it, they just told you to mind your business. There wasn't any further investigation?
Yeah, well, once you when you are doing sting operation, man, what happens is that once you make the transaction with the subject and that person is taken to the ground and handcuffed, you're supposed to take the drugs and the money, it goes in the manila folder because that's evidence. And that folder has a red tape with initials on it. And at the end of the day, at the end of the night, they was keeping the proceeds and they was keeping the drugs. And I told them, you guys are no different than the ones we just arrested. You should be going downtown yourself.
Man.
And they told me to mind my own business. I said, what do you mean mind my business?
How big was the unit? How big was your unit?
It was they have to have been about maybe 20, 30 of us, if not more.
Wow. So how many people work with you on a daily basis?
Well, there was like, I say about 5 or 6 of us with the actually posting the undercover sellers.
Okay. So you guys had a lot of code words.
Yes, because you have sellers and then you have the backup unit that move in and execute the arrest.
Okay, so when you guys are literally on location working, where is your backup unit at?
The backup unit is like maybe 100 feet away from us in the cars. So they got they're actually unmarked units from different locations. So once I make the transaction with the subjects, and I back away from them, I give them the drug, they give me the money. Once they give me the money, I back away from them and I take off my hat or I take off a towel. That's to let backup unit know that the transaction has been made and for them to move in. So once the backup group move in, we take off running. Like we're running away from the cops, like we're not involved with the situation, like we're actually really drug dealers when in fact we're officers.
Damn. Wow.
It sounds like a lot of tension and stress in that situation as well.
Well, to be honest with you, it's no tension, man. It's no stress. I grew up in that type of environment, and of course, I've seen it all, man. And of course, I went out there because, I heard a lot of guys in the jail saying, man, they planting drugs on us, they beating us to the ground, they taking money from us, and of course, I wanted to find out if what they were saying was true, and that's why I decided to go out there and start working undercover.
Wow. And so you were able to confirm all of what they were saying were not just random accusations.
No, they were not random accusations, sir. It was actually real. It was real. I lived it. I watched it.
Wow. That is just crazy, man. And I mean, we've seen a lot of the stories and stuff like that, and then just hearing from you, what that looked like. But I gotta ask you, who came up with titling individuals as subjects? Well, how did that even came about? How did that, what was that about? Like that conversation, let's call them subjects.
Well, the reason why you called assailant or a subject is a person who actually has committed a crime. Now that person becomes a subject.
I see. So from the action, that action is now the subject.
Yes, they're considered to be a subject or assailant.
Now, people that bought drugs, like let's say these people are not drug dealers, they just come in to buy drugs to get high. What happened with those people?
Yes, they're taken into custody. As a matter of fact, that's how you create your CIs, because a lot of times people who actually go out and they purchase drugs and they get caught, that's when they come to us and say, hey, listen, when you're faced with 5 years, 10 years, if you want to work it off you, you can tell on somebody else. And then, of course, you have paid informants and then you have regular informants, So the paid informants are the ones that actually they get paid to go out there and do what they do. And of course, they get a downward departure in their sentence.
Wow. What was the first time you seen an unjust event happen with fellow members of your unit?
Stemming back from 1990 all the way up until maybe 1998. And that's really when I began to see a lot of different things unfold before my eyes, man. And, I had gone through the Crossover Academy. I went from correction to law enforcement. So I went to Palm Beach Community College in order to go from correction to law enforcement. And back in 1998 is when I, began to witness a lot of these different things take place. And of course, that's when I began to speak out. And of course, they told me I couldn't work out on the streets anymore. And they put me back into jail.
So you went back to, was it prison or just jail? So you was just back in the jail as a CO?
Yes, I went back. But we don't call them CO, we call them detention officers that work for the county. COs are people who work in the state institution.
Oh, okay. Wow. So you ended your time as a sheriff back in the jail.
I was actually taken from the streets and I was placed back in the jail. I told them I don't care. That's where I started from anyway, you know what I mean? And of course, when they put me back in the jail, things intensified for me, Okay. Next thing you know, I go back, I'm working in the jail, and lo and behold, on June 15, 2000, I go to work that day. I'm working on the 6th floor, and I go home, and I said, I normally take a shower. I lie down for about a couple hours. I get up around about 5:30 to go in my backyard and work out. And of course, when I was working out with one of my neighbors, and I happened to look across the street from my home that I was living in, and I saw the drug task force or the SWAT team. So I told him, I said, wow, that must be the drug task force or the SWAT team mounting up over there at the Citgo. And when they saw me, they all jumped their cars and sped down the back street. So I told my neighbor, I said, man, let's go to the front of my yard and see what's going on. So when I went to the front of my yard, 60 cops stormed me at gunpoint.
Wow.
I had my kids at gunpoint, I'm at gunpoint. And I said, what is this about? And they said, you Raymond Hicks? I said, you guys know I'm Raymond Hicks. What you mean, am I Raymond Hicks? They said, well, we got a warrant for your arrest. I said, a warrant for who arrest? So they never presented me with no warrant. And then this one black dude, Ricky Clark, he come pat me on my shoulder. Yo, Ray, calm down, man. I said, man, what? I said, Ricky, what is this about? Man, just calm down. I said, what you mean calm down, Ricky? I said, what did I do? What did I do wrong? So, of course, my wife had went to Winn-Dixie, and my kids was like 12 and 7 years of age. Yeah. And all of us at gunpoint. And so Dave Robshaw from Internal Affairs, he comes and tell me, Ray, we're going to suspend you pending the outcome of this case. I'm like, what case? He asked me if I had any weapons in my home. I said, yes, I have weapons. They belong to me.
Right.
They go in there, they tear up my home. Next thing you know, they handcuff me, place me. My wife, she comes back home now because my daughter done made contact with her. She comes up, she's patting at her chest, like she's having heart palpitations. And she's asking questions. Hey, what's going on? What did he do? So they put me in a paddy wagon. They put me in a unmarked cruiser, and they take me over to District 5 to book me in. So when I get over there to District 5, I'm still asking the question, why am I here? And they well, we can't discuss it. What do you mean you can't discuss it? You guys just come and took me from my home. You ripped up my house, you know, and you telling me that you can't discuss it?
Yeah.
So, of course, they take me over to the city jail. So when I get there, they put me in solitary confinement for the 24 hours. I'm still asking questions. Why am I here?
Right.
The next morning, the marshal shows up. I'm like, what are the marshals doing here? Ray, we here to take you to court. I said, wait a minute, man, this must be real serious, man. For the marshals to be here to take me to court, what did I do? Well, we can't discuss it, Ray. We're just here to take you to court. So they handcuffed me and shackled me. They put me in an unmarked unit, and they transport me over to the federal jail for a booking, you know, for magistrate. So when I get there, my wife and my mom is sitting in the courtroom. So the prosecutor said, when I'm at work, I was in the top 10% of my department. You know, Mr. Cornell, I was a Gold Cross recipient. I was a Silver Cross recipient. I was 2-time Deputy of the Month. Never been in trouble my entire life. So she says when he's at work, he's in the top 10% of his department. But when he's not at work, he's into other curricular activity. And she proffered to the courts. She said to the courts that I went to various states delivering 350 kilograms of cocaine that was equivalent to $750 million.
Man, what? Man.
So do you think that this is related to you bringing up some of the injustices that you saw? Do you think that?
Yes, absolutely, ma'am. Absolutely.
Man. So what kind of charges was you facing?
They charged me with trafficking 350 kilograms of cocaine that was equivalent to $750 million.
Ah.
And the magistrate judge, she said, you know, you're not a flight risk because I didn't have a passport at the time, but
right.
She said you're a menace to society.
Man, what? How was they able to do that though? Like because they're giving you the work to work at. So they put none of the undercover work that you were doing into consideration, or they were trying to rule that out?
No, they were trying to destroy me, man. Because, you know, there was a code of silence in law enforcement. And when you break that code of silence, it can become detrimental to you, your family, and everybody else that's associated with you. These guys thought that I was going to throw them under the bus, and the only way that they can silence me was to do what they did to me. So when you look at the video that I sent you, Brother Cornell, with Ms. Jane Turner, she's former FBI. She did 26 years with the FBI. She was also a supervisor, and she was a SWAT member. There's several other people that I've actually spoken to about this particular situation. Me and my family is waiting to get in front of Congress right now and address this situation in reference to whistleblower. You know, it's a shame, it's a disgrace. I don't care if it's me, my wife, my kids, my mother, whoever. You know, if you out there, you committed crimes, man, you made your bed hard, you're going to lie down in it. But It's a shame, it's a disgrace that these people have, you know, caused me nothing but grief, you know, and humiliation, me and my family, my wife and kids, for no reason at all, because they thought I was going to throw them under the bus. So this is their way of trying to silence me. Wow. So the magistrate judge, she slammed the gavel and she said, I'm going to detain you. I'm going to detain you with a no bond hold. I had 15 years on the force. And of course, they took me back to the holding cell, and there was like 5 other guys that was arrested with me. These are guys that I used to work out with. And I thought maybe they'd said something wrong. And when I went into the holding cell, I'm getting ready to tear all their head off. And they're like, wait a minute, Big Hicks, man, you tripping, man. We ain't did nothing to you, man. I said, man, what the?
Yeah.
So, and I haven't heard you say anything about having an attorney at that point in time. So it sounds like they didn't tell you the charges. and they didn't allow you to have access to an attorney. Is that what happened?
Yes, ma'am. I didn't have no attorney there with me at the time. No.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, they didn't even give me a court-appointed attorney until I got down to the federal detention center in Miami.
Wow.
And when I got down there, they treated me like I was the lowest scum on the face of this earth, man.
Man, how much years was you facing?
Natural life imprisonment without possible parole.
That's harsh.
Man.
And what year was this?
It happened in 2000.
2000.
Oh, man. So, did you do any time? Like, did you have to go to prison? How did it unfold?
I served almost 2 years incarceration.
Man.
And they put me in a hole for 5 months. Total darkness, 23 hours a day, 1 hour a day for recreation. Solitary confinement. And every day the officer was jigging at me. You're that effing cop, I hope you're gone for the rest of your life, and you didn't deserve to be an officer. And I told him, I said, no, you guys, you guys are treating me like I'm the lowest scum on the face of this earth, when in fact that I was a highly decorated officer and I ain't doing nothing wrong. Yeah, that's what they all say. I said, I don't know what all they said, but I'm telling you that I haven't done anything wrong. And every day I wouldn't even eat food because I felt like they would spit in my food, And if it wasn't a hamburger or hot dog, whatnot, I wasn't going to eat it, man. And after being in solitary confinement for as long as I did, it'll drive you, it'll literally drive you insane, man.
Yeah.
And I began to do like 1,000 push-ups, 1,500 push-ups every other day, because now I'm conditioning my mind and I'm conditioning my body, because I feel like at some point,
man, they were really trying to break.
we're going to go to war,
Yeah.
And, I never forget Mr. Fernandez. He called me out and they handcuffed me and shackled me, took me to his office. He says, Ray, why are you threatening my staff? I said, I'm not threatening your staff, man. I said, every day these people come in here, they're jigging at me for no reason at all, telling me I'm this effing crooked cop. I should be gone for the rest of my life when these people don't even know me, man. And I said, I haven't even talked to my wife and kids. So he said, I'm going to give you a phone call. And I will never forget Mr. Fernandez the longest day I live.
Man.
I talked to my wife and my kids. And he said, Ray, the only other option you have is to go down to general population. That's how you're able to make contact with your family. I said, I don't care where you put me, man. I hold my own. And they put me down to general population, which is a death threat to an officer. I was there with 8 guys that I had arrested or I was over when I was in the jail, man, when I worked in the jail. That's a death threat to an officer, man. To take an officer and put him in general population, that's automatic death, man.
Yeah.
And here come this one black dude. He was about 6'4", 270. I'm 6'1", 290. And he saw my picture parade over the newscast. And he's like, oh, that's that effing cop. So one of the dudes that knew me from the streets, we call him Brian, but his name was Maurice. So Maurice said, man, you know what that is? He said, you tripping, man. That's Big Hicks, man. He come from where we come from. He gonna thump, man. You tripping. So, of course, there's like 122 inmates in the unit, and there's one officer. So all the inmates gathered up around the door. So I went to go in my room and put the bedroll down. I turn around, he's in the door. So I told the other inmates, were like, big man, you running your mouth going on in there. So I told him, I said, dude, listen, if you got a problem with me, come on in here, we can handle this like men. And of course, with big guys, my size are bigger, they want to try and rush you. But what he didn't know, man, my hands are good, man. And I tried to kill him.
Oh man.
I tried to put my fist through his brain, man. Blood gushing from his face like a faucet. And these dudes out of Miami, they were like, come on, big homie. They started calling me big homie. They said, man, come on, man, you're gonna kill him, man. I was literally trying to kill him, Cornell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and eventually the officer came, you know, and everybody scattered, man. And of course he requested to get off the floor. That was his best bet because I really want to finish it, man. You know, don't freaking try me. Who the freak you think you playing with, man? I don't play like that. You know, anybody that know me in Fort Lauderdale will tell you, man, Hicks, listen, I don't bother nobody, but don't bother me, man.
Yeah.
You understand me? Because you're gonna get what you're looking for.
Now, at this time, you know, you going through all this stuff. What was your wife? How was she taking all this?
Listen, man.
I'm sorry, man.
Yeah, it's so tough. And it's, you know, the solitary confinement is considered torture in many
terrible.
places as well.
It's terrible.
And I think this is really kind of showing us not only what can go wrong within some of these illicit activities that are going on, but also, you know, how we need to reform the criminal justice system and how we treat folks who are incarcerated, because
it's terrible.
It's dangerous. It's a dehumanizing experience. And that's in the best of circumstances a lot of times. And that's not even including folks like you who are wrongfully accused of something in a retaliatory kind of way.
Yeah.
So it's a really testament to how broken the system it is.
It's terrible. I got to take my hats off to you, man, because, you know, you were in the box for 5 months, right?
5 months, absolutely.
And listen, when I was in jail, they had a guy, they put him in the box. He was supposed to be in the box for 30 days. He went crazy after a week. They took him to the crazy house. It's crazy. So, man, hats off to you, man, for even holding strong like that. I couldn't even imagine what your family was going through. What was the communication like between you and your family at that time?
You know, my wife and kids, you know, I lost everything, man. You know?
Man.
Everything we worked hard for.
Wow.
You know? I mean, to be faced with natural life imprisonment and, you know, of course, I'm listening to my wife. You know, she's telling me, Raymond, they're going to foreclose on the house. Raymond, they come to repossess the cars. Raymond, I had to pawn my wedding band and my engagement ring. You know, Raymond, the kids are being taunted in school. You know, all these things, man. And I'm trying to, you know, digest this. And then I'm faced with natural life imprisonment without possible parole.
Right. Wow.
No,
man.
Nobody understand, man. It's like, you know, I've been married now for 37 years, man. My wife and I have been together for 39 years, you know, and my kids were so young, you know, and I'm saying to myself, everything I worked for, you know, if I wanted to be a hood rat, it's very easy for me. My whole family be in and out of jail, man. You know, jail and prison. My family, that's all they know. I'm the one who was trying to keep everybody, you know, out of jail. You know, telling them to do the right thing. But yet still, you know, I'm the one who, you know, faced with all of this nonsense, but only because I stood up. I stood up to my dad, man.
Yeah.
When I was 30, my mother would tell you right now, if she was on this live feed, I stood up to him. When I was 13 years of age, I told him, I said, man, you ain't gonna keep putting your hands on my mother, man. I said, every time you turn around, you know, you jumping on my mom every Friday, Saturday, sometimes Sunday, man. You ain't gonna keep doing that. And and of course, my dad didn't care nothing about the cops. He hated cops. Always theorized how he would blow a cop brains out. And I'm like, Daddy, the police are good people, man. He's like, man, they're cruel and they're corrupt, man. And you don't need to be involved with these folks. You know? So to be honest with you, it's a shame, it's a disgrace, man. You know? But as I got older, I told myself, listen, man, when I was 28 years of age, my brother told me he called himself jumping on my mama. When I went over there, I told him, what I tell you, man? You know, I was 28 years of age. I said, Daddy, if you put your hands on my mother again, I'll blow your freaking brains out, man. I don't know who the freak you think you're playing with. Don't you ever put your hands on my mother, man. And my mom said, wait a minute, son, I didn't raise you like that. You know? I said, yeah, but I'm not going to tolerate him doing that as a grown man no more. It's over. It's over.
Man.
It's over, man. You know, nobody understand, man. It's been 21 years now.
Yeah.
You know, since I've been pleading in my innocence. I done talked to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, nobody want. It's like, you know, I just feel like people, they listen to you. I didn't even know that sometimes people get paid for doing podcasts and all this other stuff. Only thing I know is that I have a story.
Yeah.
But I found out later that all these people's making hundreds and thousands of dollars off of my story, which I had no knowledge of until just recently. And I'm saying, I don't care about no money. I never had money anyway, you know, but I care about is my life and my family, man. And to be honest with you, listen, it's only about, it's my relationship with God is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's
where I'm at right now.
That's good, man.
That's the only thing that could have got me through this here is my relationship with the Lord. Because I watched my mom stretch her arms out towards heaven and begin to pray to God when we didn't even have food on the table. And I saw Miss Maggie Wallace come down the street with 3 bags of groceries. And I'll never forget it. I was about maybe 9 or 10, 11 years of age. My mom cooked pork chops, rice, and gravy that day. I'll never forget it. So to be honest with you, I know there's a God.
Yeah.
And you know, I've changed a negative situation into a positive. So I went back to college, you know, and I graduated in 2012. I actually went through theology and got my doctorate degree. My ministry is in the streets. It's not behind 4 walls.
Right.
Because I tell people all the time about my testimony and how God brought me from the lowest point of my life. I couldn't even feed my family. I scraped up nickels, quarters, dimes, and pennies to put food on the table. But through it all, I've seen the manifestation of Christ. Some people say, I know God. Do you really know God? I've reached out to some of these pastors, man, of these mega churches and everybody else, but nobody seemed to want to interview me. Nobody wants to do nothing to help me. So I say, you know what? I'm still going to trust God.
Yeah.
In the midst of the storm, I'm still going to trust God. And I tell anybody, if you don't have a relationship with God, then you should get one. Because Cornell and this sister right here, man, I started drinking. I never took a drink a day in my life. I never tried a marijuana cigarette in my life. And I started drinking. Yeah. And the brother said to me, he said, Hicks, man, what you got in that cup is not you, man. He said, I may sound like a hypocrite. I smoke marijuana, but that's not you, man. And to be honest with you, you know, that's why I said I got a testimony, my brother. And I'm not going to sit here and fabricate it, because I tell both of you guys is that through it all, when they came to me and gave me the court-appointed attorney, eventually, they tried to force me to take time. I said, no, I'm not taking time for something I didn't do.
Yeah.
And I found out that the court-appointed attorneys, they get a bonus. When you take a plea, they get a bonus.
Wow.
Yeah, they got to move people through. So they don't always give the best representation. It's the representation of last resort, right? But tell us, because I am interested in hearing. So, you know, clearly you're not incarcerated now. This happened in 2000. So how did you get your freedom?
Well, I took the case to trial, ma'am. Finally, the 2 court-appointed attorneys that were trying to force me to take time, one of them said to me, Mr. Marty Fagenbaum, he said, Ray, on the manuscript, write down everything that happened, because this could possibly be a bestseller book, maybe a movie. And of course, I took his advice, and I began to write down everything that I was going through and what I witnessed while I was there. And of course, they gave me, he took me to court, and he told the judge, he said, Your Honor, I don't want nothing else to do with this case. He said, I want to get off this case, because he knew they was wrong. Because I kept asking him, I said, what are drugs involved in the case? Where the money that's involved in the case? And then so he got off the case, so they give me another court-appointed attorney. He tried to force me on a coercion. Man, listen, the feds got a 99.9% conviction rate. And he says, there's only 2% that's actually going to go back to the streets. I said, well, I'm going to be in that 2% because I'm not going in there and I'm not going to admit to something that I didn't get to do. I'm going to trial, man.
Right.
He said, Ray, you're faced with natural life imprisonment, man. They offer you 16 and a half months. You've been down for 11 and a half months. I said, I'd rather take life. I'm not going to admit to something that I didn't do. So my wife went through her thrift savings and she got a former prosecutor named Michael Bloom. And Mr. Bloom came in and represented me. He had never lost a case in 15 years. He said, if I've never seen an innocent man, you're one of them, and you shouldn't be here. And he said, I'm ready to take you to trial, which is what I wanted to hear. So I took my case to trial in federal court. They chose 11 whites, 1 black, and 1 black alternate, all business people. And the chief judge said, what are drugs? No drugs. Where the money? No money. He said, so why is this man here? Well, he was given confidential law enforcement information. That's ran through your social security number, FCIC, NCIC. I told him I had not been running that information. They found out, the jury and the chief judge found out that I wasn't running that information. Then they said I was on audio tape. So when they played the tape for the jury and the judge, they found out it wasn't my voice, but in fact, it was the same deputy who arrested me.
Wow. Wow. Man. Well, I'm glad that.
Oh, that's a turn.
Yeah.
That's a twist.
Yeah, I'm glad that turned out the way that it did, man. You know, God always come through for his people, man. So, you know.
Did they get the deputy then?
They was all promoted, man.
So you heard the voice of the deputy on the audio that they were trying to pin on you.
Yes, ma'am.
And then they never went after the deputy?
No, the deputy was promoted.
Oh, my.
Got a promotion.
Oh.
They all got a promotion. He went from a regular deputy to a detective. The detective went to a sergeant. The sergeant went to a lieutenant. The lieutenant went to a captain. The captain went to a lieutenant colonel.
Wow. That is sad, right?
And I got audio tapes to prove everything I'm saying. Don't take my word. When you get a chance, go to Google and you type in missing documents, turn up in deputy lawsuit, you can read it. I took appendix and put it in the back of my book. So everything I'm conveying to you brothers and sisters this morning, you can read it. I took appendix and put it in the back of the book.
Man.
And to be honest with you, it's a shame, it's a disgrace. But through it all, man, you know, I look up and I thank the Lord each and every day. And I tell anybody, when you say you got a relationship with God, you know, do you really have a relationship with God? Or you really gonna trust God when you're in the midst of the storm?
Right.
And that's what I've learned, man, through it all. You know, God is doing some amazing things in my life. You know, the jury came back with a not guilty verdict within 30 minutes.
Wow.
Wow, that's good. That's good, man.
Yeah.
Now, talk to us a little bit about this book, I'm Still Standing. Give us a synopsis. I mean, you've talked about everything that have happened to you while there, what that journey was like. How much of this is in the book?
Everything I'm conveying to you right now. From the time that I watched my mother and father engage into a fight, he beat my mom because my mom tried to stop him from going out. I talk about all these things, man. You know, my mom, her white gown was drenched in blood, you know, and of course she said, don't worry about it, he got to come home. And when he came home, he lied down on that sofa and my mom took a straight razor that they used in the barbershop and she began to cut him from head to toe, you know?
Wow.
And I told him, I said, don't you cut him no more. She said, that bastard, if it wasn't for you, I'd kill him. You know, and this is the thing, man. You know, when you raised in that type of environment, man, you say to yourself, you know, a lot of people don't understand what go on in the hood, man.
Yeah.
You understand me? Some people say, well, man, why are these kids acting out? Why are they so bad? Why are they doing this? A lot of this stuff comes from your home, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, man.
And to be honest with you, again, like I said, I always have inspired people. As a matter of fact, it's ironic that you asked me that question, Brother Cornell, because there's a brother that I grew up with. He went to prison 3 times, and I kept getting on him. His name is Gaston Akins. Yeah. We call him G Fresh. he had a shootout with the former sheriff, Scott Israel, when Scott was just a regular patrolman at the park. G was out there selling drugs. Next thing you know, he turned his life around because of me. You know who gave me a job?
Yeah.
He was a foreman of a construction site. I talk about it in the book. He was working for Estalda Construction. He found out that I needed a job. He gave me a job, and I'm working as a laborer, making $9 an hour, working 13 hours a shift, 13 hours a day.
Wow. Man.
And then he became a superintendent. And now he owned his own construction company. His kids worked out with the Miami Dolphins, Jonathan Akins. His other son worked out with Jacksonville Jaguars, Marquise Aiken. So to be honest with you, it's amazing to me, man, how, you know, some things unfold. But at the end of the day, Brother Cornell and this beautiful sister sitting next to you, man, I truly thank God, you know, for each and everything that the Lord has done in my life, man, and what he's doing. I'm still inspiring people, you know,
Yeah.
I'm still motivating people, man. I'm still helping young kids, you know, and even after that arrest, they came at me 2 more times. That's why you got to read the book. Yeah, after I come home, you know, and before I'm evicted out of my home, you know, they stormed my home a second time at gunpoint. 60-some cops saying I was shooting at someone in my backyard. And my wife and I, we were in court.
Wow. Wow.
So tell us the name of the book and where we can find it.
The book is titled I'm Still Standing by Raymond Hicks. Of course, it's on Amazon. The audio book, they say it's a bestseller. It's on Barnes & Noble, Walmart, because Ingram Publishing, you know, I was only charging like $5.97 when I first published the book. The lady who edited my book, she's the former editor of the National Enquirer. Her name is Martha Moffett. I never laid eyes on her, not once. She's Caucasian. She lived in New Jersey. She said, Raymond, she said, listen, forget about a bestseller. She said, this book is going to become a movie. And she said, I don't need to edit your book. I just need to put things in its proper place.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, you know, the Spirit of the Lord said to me, I said, Lord, what would the book look like? And God said, you in uniform behind bars. So the gentleman who actually did the cover of my book, he drew that picture of me. His name is Dick Copel, and he resides in Deerfield, and he's Caucasian, and he actually drew the picture of me, and he told me, he said, get 2 broomsticks. So when you see the knuckles in the front of that book, those are actually my knuckles, because I took 2 sticks and I held it up like this here, and that's how he actually created the cover of the book.
Wow.
And the title of the book came from Marvin Sapp, you know, gospel singer, I'm Still Standing. Okay. And of course, you know, when I look up, man, everything I've gone through, I'm still standing. You know, and just to let you all know, that second arrest, when they said I was shooting at someone, I took that case to trial. And the judge said, we're the victim, no victim. Did you do a ballistic test? No. Where the bullet casing? We have none. He said, so why would you bring a highly decorated officer in my courtroom saying he committed this crime when in fact that I got documents showing that him and his wife was in court? Yeah. So within about 10 minutes, I was tried by the court and I was acquitted by the judge. So I went back into the community just to show you all what I'm trying to do. I went back into the community. I won the highest award. If you go to Google, you type in African American Achievers, I won this award. I helped 25 kids accomplish their high school diploma and GED. And Mr. Jim Moran, the philanthropist, he gave me that award. It's only given to Blacks who goes out and make a difference in their community.
Right.
And of course, it's a prestigious award.
Yeah.
The Broward Sheriff Office stormed my home a 3rd time. This time they were looking to kill me. But my 4-year-old son and my 18-year-old daughter was there. Again, they dragged me out of my house. I couldn't get my arms behind me because I'm, too wide. And the 2 officers got into an argument. So the white sergeant said, put the effing cuffs on him. So the black gentleman told him, he said, Robert Crumb, he said, man, Ray gonna need a double set of cuffs, man. He can't get his arms behind him. So the 2 of them engaged into a verbal confrontation that literally almost led to a physical altercation. So I told him, I said, Crumb, you ain't got to argue with this guy, man. I managed to get my hand behind me. And of course, he said, man, you can't get your arms behind you, Ray. And So eventually the sergeant gave in, and then that's when they got the shackles. I said, Sergeant, what's the purpose of the shackle? Ray, you're a big guy. We don't want any problem. I said, Sergeant, if it was gonna be a problem, it'd have been a problem a long time ago, man. But you got a job to do. I get downtown, they got 25 deputies waiting on me in the Sally Port with black gloves on, saying that I'm violent. How do I know that? Because the deputy who I helped get on with the Broward Sheriff Office, his name Richard Lee, he said, Ray, I stayed here to book you in, man, because they came across the air that you was violent. I was there talking to a young lady who I went through the crossover academy with. Her name was Figueroa. We talking about our family. So when they saw I wasn't violent, they turned around and walked inside. So I said, Lee, what did they arrest me for? Because they never told me what they arrested me for. He said, child abuse. I said, child abuse? I said, come on, man. I just wanted to hire someone in the community. I never even touched my own kids. So he said, what's strange, on this PC, there is no victim. So he said, when he brought it to the sergeant's attention, the sergeant says, well, this was done administratively. I have nothing to do with this. So the prosecutor, she did a thorough investigation. She threw the case out, no pros.
Man, listen, I got to tell you, Mr. Hicks, man, you got a blessing on you, and, whatever the evil one is trying to rob you of that, obviously you can't win, man. And, you keeping your head up, you got an amazing story, man. We don't even have more time. Like, we're literally running out of time right now, man. We got to get you back on the show, man, to continue this conversation. This was beautiful.
I want to see the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, this is.
Well, it's amazing that you say that, because there was a gentleman named Joel Wine out of New York. He heard about my story. He read my book, and he was actually going to produce, the first movie he ever produced was Invasion of the USA. And of course, because of the pandemic, everything was placed at a standstill. But just recently, a gentleman who I work with now, he was in the movie industry. So he actually flew a director in here, a young dude. And of course, we actually trying to put together a trailer right now. I don't have the finances. These people they owe me a ton of money right now. And I filed for malicious prosecution, false arrest, imprisonment, a violation of my Constitution, civil rights, supervision, retention, destruction of evidence. But if you ever get a chance, I hope and pray. And if you send me your address, man, I'll send you. I'll sign a book and send it to you. So you all can read. Because to be honest with you, the book powerful, man. I'm not sitting here. I'm not even giving you guys a fraction of what really happened. I understand you guys are, pushed for time. But first and foremost, and what's the sister name sitting next to you?
Cindy.
Yeah. I want to thank both of you all, man, just for affording me. I tell you as a brother to love you, respect both of you, man. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I followed what the Spirit of the Lord told me to do this morning. That's why I called you so early, Cornell.
Yeah, man.
I apologize, man, but
no, you're good, man. Hey, listen.
Thanks for sharing the story. It's so amazing.
Yeah. Everything happened for a reason, man. So, listen, man. Just continue being patient. Continue to be patient. Continue to show how persistent you are, and what this journey is like. And listen, man. Stuff is coming. So, keep that patient. Stuff is coming. Hey, guys, listen, because we're over time a little bit right now. I want to thank you guys. We've just created a story with Mr. Hicks. Until our next episode of Stories to Create podcast right here at EHAS Club, I want to thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you.
Yeah, man, that was beautiful, man. That.
Thanks for tuning in and downloading this episode of Stories to Create. We appreciate you being part of this growing community of storytellers and listeners. If today's conversation inspired you, please share the show with friends, family, or anyone who could use a little motivation in their journey. A special thank you to our sponsors, EHAS Organization, Cornell Bunting LLC, and Nostril Cheese Chase. for supporting the mission and making this podcast possible. To learn more about our work, upcoming projects, and how you can get involved, be sure to visit www.hissinkorg and www.cornellbunting.com. Until next time, keep creating, keep growing, and remember, your story has power.